The elevator doors slid open with a familiar metallic sigh, and Lauren Tran stepped into the marble-floored lobby of Coldstone Enterprises. It was only 6:45 a.m., but the office already smelled faintly of fresh coffee and printer ink, a scent she had come to associate with ambition. Most of the building would remain silent for another hour, but not Lauren. Never Lauren. For 7 years, she had been the company's invisible engine. The one who stayed when others left, who volunteered for the impossible projects, who turned chaos into order. Her colleagues joked that she didn't just put out fires, she built fireproof systems. And though she laughed along, deep down, she knew the truth. She had earned every ounce of respect this company had to give. Today, she reminded herself, might finally be the day they gave it back. Lauren swiped her badge, pushed open the glass doors of the 27th floor, and stepped into her domain, the operations department. Desks still slept under dim lighting. Computer monitors blinked in standby mode. But on her desk, perfectly aligned reports and a color-coded binder sat ready for the quarterly leadership meeting. She had worked until midnight last night, finalizing every page. Her eyes still burned from lack of sleep, but her confidence was ironclad. She wasn't just ready. She was overdue. The rumors had been swirling for weeks. Richard Cole, the CEO, was preparing to announce the next head of operations. It was an open secret that Lauren was the obvious choice. Nobody else had her track record. She had saved 2 failing product launches in a single year, brought in $1 million client with a single pitch, and streamlined a process that cut costs by 12%, all before turning 30. If merit meant anything, the job was hers. By 8 a.m., the office buzz had begun to swell. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, and colleagues drifted past her desk with smiles and whispered encouragements. "You've got this, Lauren," said Peter from accounting, tapping her desk with a grin. "If they don't give it to you, the whole building will riot." Lauren laughed lightly but kept her composure. She didn't want to seem presumptuous. Still, her heart raced faster than her coffee could keep up. She glanced at the conference room through the glass wall. The long mahogany table gleamed under recessed lighting, waiting for the executives to fill their seats. By the time the leadership team gathered, anticipation had reached a fever pitch. Lauren smoothed the sleeves of her blazer and took her seat, second row from the front, surrounded by department heads and senior staff. She adjusted her notes, ready to present her quarterly report, a report she knew could serve as the perfect prologue to her promotion. Then, at precisely 9 a.m., Richard Cole entered. The CEO of Coldstone Enterprises was a tall man with silver-streaked hair and a commanding presence. His tailored navy suit carried the weight of decades of power. Conversations hushed instantly as he strode to the head of the table, placing his leather briefcase with deliberate grace. "Good morning," Richard said, his voice resonant, carrying the kind of authority that had built the company from a family-owned firm into a national powerhouse. His eyes swept the room, briefly landing on Lauren. She held her breath. For a flicker of a second, she thought she saw pride there, recognition of her years of loyalty. He continued with routine updates, revenue figures, market forecasts. Lauren followed every word, but her mind was counting down to the moment. She could almost hear the whisper of her name being announced. She pictured the polite applause, the firm handshake, the email memo that would land in every inbox. "Congratulations to Lauren Tran, our new head of operations." And then, Richard's tone shifted. "Before we close," he said, clasping his hands together, "I'd like to share an important announcement about the future of this company and the leadership of our operations department." Lauren's chest tightened. This was it. He smiled warmly, almost indulgently. "Effective immediately, I am appointing Madison Cole as the new head of operations." For a moment, the room went silent, as though every clock had stopped. Lauren blinked. The words didn't register at first. Madison Cole? Then the doors opened, and in walked Madison, 24 years old, fresh from graduate school, heels clicking like a metronome of entitlement. She wore a sharp white blazer and carried nothing but a designer handbag, her confidence radiating like a spotlight. Thank you, Uncle Richard, she said brightly, sliding into the seat at the head of the table as if she had been born for it. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Lauren's fingers went cold against her binder. Uncle. It all made sense in an instant. Madison wasn't here for merit. She was here for inheritance. For nepotism disguised as leadership. Lauren's throat burned, but she forced herself to keep her expression neutral. She even managed a small smile as Madison introduced herself, rattling off empty phrases about innovation and synergy. The words fell flat, but nobody dared challenge them, not in front of Richard. The meeting moved on, but Lauren barely heard a word. Her vision tunneled, her heart pounding with betrayal. This was supposed to be her day, her moment. Instead, it was stolen before her eyes. And as applause filled the room, hesitant, polite, insincere, Lauren clenched her jaw, a single thought echoing louder than any cheer. They underestimated me. The applause died quickly, the sound echoing off the glass walls with all the sincerity of a forced smile. Richard Cole nodded proudly, his hand resting briefly on Madison's shoulder as though she were a prize he had just unveiled. Madison, glowing with smug satisfaction, basked in the moment, her manicured fingers brushing a strand of blonde hair from her flawless face. Lauren sat frozen in her chair. Her binder of meticulously prepared reports lay unopened on the table, a monument to a dream now shattered. Around her, colleagues shifted uncomfortably, whispering under their breath. Nobody dared speak the obvious truth, that Madison had done nothing to deserve this. But Lauren heard it in their silence. She saw it in their eyes. The betrayal wasn't just hers. The entire office had been robbed. Madison has just returned from completing her graduate studies in business at NYU, Richard continued, beaming as though announcing royalty. Her fresh perspective will be invaluable in leading operations into the future. I'm confident she will uphold the values of this company while bringing in new energy. New energy. Lauren's jaw clenched so tightly it ached. She wanted to laugh, fresh out of school. With zero experience managing a team, Madison had never even filed a report or dealt with a client crisis. And yet, here she was, handed the reins of the very department Lauren had bled for. Richard's gaze swept the room. I know this may surprise some of you, he said smoothly, but family is the backbone of Colestone Enterprises. Loyalty and legacy matter here. That was it. That was the dagger. Lauren's stomach turned. Loyalty and legacy. Not merit. Not results. Not the nights she'd sacrificed, the birthdays missed, the weekends surrendered. All of it meant nothing compared to a bloodline. The meeting carried on, Madison offering shallow platitudes about innovation and embracing change. Her voice carried a rehearsed rhythm, like a student reciting lines in class. Lauren could barely hear her over the roar in her head. Every word felt like sandpaper. Every smile, every nod, another twist of the knife. Finally, Richard closed the session. Let's congratulate Madison once more. She has my full support, and I trust she will have yours. This time, the applause was even thinner, reluctant claps echoing with the weight of fear. Everyone knew what had just happened, but in corporate America, survival often meant silence. Lauren rose with the others, forcing her lips into a polite smile. She felt her pulse in her throat, her palms damp as she gathered her binder. Peter from accounting avoided her eyes. Sarah from marketing gave her the smallest sympathetic glance before quickly looking away. Even her closest allies were too afraid to acknowledge the injustice, because to do so was to risk their own place in Richard Cole's empire. As the executives filed out, Madison lingered at the head of the table, chatting lightly with Richard and basking in the glow of her new title. Lauren approached, intending to slip quietly past, but Madison's voice cut through the air. Lauren, she called sweetly, her smile wide and practiced. I've heard so much about your work. I hope we can collaborate closely. I'll need someone who knows the ropes. The condescension in her tone was razor-sharp, sugar-coated with politeness. Lauren forced a small smile. Of course, she replied evenly. I'm sure you'll learn quickly. Richard chuckled, clapping Madison on the back. That's the spirit. That's what I want to see, teamwork. Lauren nodded stiffly and walked away before the bile in her throat rose any higher. Back at her desk, she dropped the binder with a thud, her hands trembling as she sank into her chair. The hum of the office felt distant, muted, as though she were underwater. She had given everything to this company. Every ounce of talent, every late night, every sacrifice, and this was her reward. The anger rose hotter with every breath. By lunchtime, the office was buzzing with gossip. In the break room, hushed voices carried through the air. Did you see her walkin'? Like she owned the place. She's the CEO's niece. What did you expect? Poor Lauren. Everyone knows she deserved it. Lauren stood in the doorway, hearing every word. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was out, even if no one dared say it aloud in Richard's presence. By mid-afternoon, an email landed in every inbox. Please welcome Madison Cole as our new head of operations. Effective immediately. Lauren read the subject line 3 times, her fingers tightening on the mouse until it hurt. The bitterness spread through her like poison. Not because she had lost she could handle. She had lost bids, pitches, even clients before. No, this was worse. This was theft. Richard Cole had stolen her future and gift-wrapped it for someone who hadn't earned a single shred of it. And Madison had accepted it without shame. That night, long after most of the staff had gone home, Lauren sat alone at her desk. The city skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, mocking her with its endless lights. She stared at the email again, the official stamp of her humiliation. A storm brewed inside her. She could feel it taking shape, sharp and unrelenting. This wasn't the end. Not for her. As she shut down her computer and slipped the binder back into her bag, Lauren whispered to herself, a vow forged in silence. They think they've won. They have no idea what they've started. The next morning, Colestone Enterprises felt different. The same fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the same printers hummed from cubicles, and the same city skyline stretched across the glass windows. But there was a heaviness in the air, a shift in gravity that everyone felt. Madison Cole arrived at 9:30 a.m., half an hour later than most of her department. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as if announcing a parade. She wore a crisp white suit that looked fresh off a runway and carried no files, no laptop, not even a notepad. Just her phone and her confidence. "Good morning, team," she said, stepping into the operations department with a broad smile. "I am so excited to work with all of you. Together, we're going to take this company into the future." Her voice was loud, too polished, like a motivational speaker rehearsing for a college seminar. Several employees exchanged glances. A few clapped half-heartedly. Others muttered mourning under their breath before turning back to their screens. Lauren stayed seated at her desk, her hands poised over her keyboard. She watched silently as Madison moved through the office like a tourist admiring architecture. "This layout," Madison said, gesturing vaguely at the rows of cubicles, "isn't exactly inspiring. We'll need to make it more innovative. Maybe beanbags or something." Someone coughed into their sleeve to hide a laugh. Lauren's lips tightened. Beanbags? This wasn't a college dorm. This was a multi-million-dollar department responsible for handling client operations across 3 continents. Madison continued her walk, stopping at Lauren's desk. "And you must be Lauren," she said brightly, her smile wide but her eyes calculating. "Uncle Richard has told me you're very capable." Very capable. The word stung, a subtle dismissal of years of brilliance reduced to a polite adjective. "Welcome," Lauren said evenly. "If you need reports or data on ongoing projects, I have everything prepared." She gestured to the stack of binders neatly aligned on her desk. Madison waved her hand as though brushing away dust. "Oh, I'm not really a binder person. I like to keep things fresh, spontaneous, you know? Less paperwork, more energy." Lauren said nothing, but in her chest, anger coiled tighter. By mid-morning, Madison had scheduled a vision meeting in the main conference room. The entire department was summoned. Lauren filed in with the others, binder in hand, while Madison strolled to the head of the table, setting her phone face up in front of her. Okay, team, Madison began, crossing her legs and leaning back in her chair. I've been thinking a lot about synergy and innovation, and I believe we need to shift the department's energy toward creative disruption. The room was silent. Words like synergy and disruption floated in the air like helium balloons, bright but empty. From now on, Madison continued, I want fewer rigid reports and more free-form brainstorming sessions. Let's break the mold. Let's reimagine how we work. Someone scribbled half-hearted notes. Another checked their watch. Lauren's binder sat heavy on her lap. She flipped it open, revealing graphs, metrics, and strategies painstakingly prepared to secure next quarter's performance. She raised her hand. With respect, Lauren said carefully, clients are already pressing us for concrete results. Brainstorming sessions won't replace deliverables. We need to focus on deadlines and measurable outcomes, or we risk losing contracts. For a moment, silence. A ripple of tension spread across the table. Madison's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. Thank you for your input, Lauren, she said sweetly, her tone sugar-laced with venom. But I think part of the reason operations has been so rigid is because people here are too afraid to think outside the box. I want to change that culture. Lauren felt the sting. Madison wasn't just dismissing her, she was painting her as part of the problem. After the meeting, whispers spread like wildfire. Did you hear that? Someone murmured near the water cooler. She basically called Lauren old-fashioned. Unbelievable. Lauren carried this place for years. Lauren kept her expression composed, but inside, her fury boiled. Madison's incompetence was obvious, but Richard's shield of protection made it dangerous to challenge her openly. By afternoon, Madison made her first official blunder. A major client called with concerns about shipment schedules. Instead of transferring the call to logistics or consulting Lauren, Madison answered personally. She promised an impossible delivery date without checking the numbers. When the call ended, she strutted into the department. Good news, everyone. I just secured a major commitment with Westbridge Corporation. They're thrilled with our direction. Lauren's stomach dropped. Westbridge was already teetering on the edge of dissatisfaction, and now they'd been promised something undeliverable. Madison, Lauren said, choosing her words carefully, Westbridge requires a 2-month turnaround. The commitment you just made isn't possible without risking the quality of. Madison cut her off with a laugh. Details, details. That's why I have you, Lauren. You'll figure it out. I trust you. The department stared. Some with pity. Some with quiet outrage. Lauren inhaled slowly, her binder clutched tight against her chest. She wanted to scream, to tear down the glass walls of the office and expose this fraud for what she was. But she didn't. Not yet. Because beneath the humiliation, beneath the fury, a sharper thought was taking root. Madison wasn't just incompetent. She was reckless. And reckless leaders eventually destroy themselves. Lauren returned to her desk, opening her binder with deliberate calm. Her pen scratched across the page, recording every mistake, every false promise, every reckless word. She would not confront Madison head-on, not yet. She would wait. She would watch. And when the time came, she would make sure the whole company saw the truth. For now, she let Madison bask in her illusion of power. Because Lauren knew what Madison didn't. The higher you climb on a ladder you didn't build, the harder the fall when it breaks beneath you. By the end of her first week, Madison Cole had already made enough mistakes to fill an internal audit report. She promised unrealistic deadlines to 2 major clients, forgot to include key financials in a budget draft, and hosted a creative brainstorming session that devolved into employees doodling on whiteboards while deadlines piled up untouched. The department wasn't just irritated, they were worried. Lauren sat in the break room late Friday afternoon, her coffee long gone cold. Across from her sat Peter from accounting, his tie loosened, his voice low. She doesn't know what she's doing, Peter muttered, glancing toward the door as if Madison might suddenly appear. If she keeps this up, Westbridge will pull out and the numbers will crater. Richard has to see it, right? Lauren stirred her coffee without drinking it. He doesn't want to see it, she replied quietly. He thinks loyalty is more important than competence. That's why she's here. Peter sighed, leaning back in his chair. And where does that leave the rest of us? Cleaning up her mess? You've already saved her twice this week. Lauren's jaw tightened. He was right. Twice now, she had stepped in at the last minute to correct Madison's errors that could have cost millions. But instead of recognition, she had been brushed aside, her corrections presented as Madison's quick adaptability. Lauren pressed her palms against the table, steadying herself. I can't keep bailing her out forever, she whispered. At some point, someone has to hold her accountable. Peter gave her a sympathetic look. Careful, Lauren. You know how Richard is. He won't hear a word against family. And that was the heart of it. Richard Cole, once a man respected for building Coldstone from the ground up, had become blind when it came to Madison. Loyalty, legacy, family. Those words had become his gospel, even if it meant sacrificing the company's stability. Later that evening, Lauren found herself in Richard's office. The CEO sat behind his mahogany desk, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that bled the last light of the city's skyline. His suit jacket hung on the chair, his tie loosened, but his presence was as commanding as ever. Lauren, he said warmly, gesturing for her to sit. What can I do for you? She hesitated only briefly before stepping forward. I wanted to discuss some concerns about operations. Specifically, about Madison. Richard's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. A flicker of defensiveness sharpened his features. Go on, he said, though his tone carried warning. Lauren sat, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. Sir, I respect your decision. But the commitments Madison has made to Westbridge and Brookfield are, well, they're not feasible. We risk damaging client trust. I believe she needs more oversight before making promises that affect deliverables. Richard leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. For a long moment, he studied her, the silence stretching. Then he smiled faintly. You're protective of the department. I appreciate that. But Madison is young. She'll make mistakes. That's how leaders learn. Lauren's chest tightened. With respect, sir, these mistakes could cost millions. We don't have the margin for trial-and-error leadership. Richard's smile faded into something harder. I understand your concern, but you need to trust me. Madison has potential. She brings a fresh perspective. She may not do things the way you would, but that doesn't mean she's wrong. Lauren swallowed her frustration, forcing her voice to stay calm. It's not about different methods. It's about deliverables. If we fail Westbridge again, they'll take their business elsewhere. Richard's gaze cooled. Lauren, he said softly, his voice heavy with authority, I value your contributions. But I won't tolerate undermining my family. Madison has my full support. Do I make myself clear? The words hit like a slap. Clear. Crystal clear. This wasn't about competence. This was about bloodlines, about power sealed by last names. Lauren rose slowly, her binder clutched tight against her chest. Yes, sir, she said, her voice even though her throat burned. As she turned to leave, Richard added almost casually, You've been carrying this department for years. Don't let jealousy ruin your legacy. Jealousy. The word echoed in her head long after she left his office. He thought she was jealous. As if everything she'd earned, every sleepless night and sacrificed weekend, meant nothing more than envy of a spoiled child with the right surname. By the time she returned to her desk, her anger had crystallized into something sharper. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. That evening, the office emptied around her. Desks went dark one by one, the hum of conversation fading into silence. Lauren sat alone under the cold fluorescent light, staring at her reflection in the glass window. Her reflection didn't look broken. It looked determined. If Richard wouldn't listen, if Madison was untouchable, then Lauren would stop trying to fight fair. She would stop warning, stop shielding them from consequences. Let Madison keep making reckless promises. Let Richard keep ignoring the danger. When the collapse came, and it would come, Lauren would be ready with every fact, every document, every piece of evidence. And then Richard would see what it cost to protect family over truth. The following Monday began with a brittle kind of cheer, the kind that cracked at the edges. Madison Cole swept into the operations department at 10 a.m., latte in hand, sunglasses still perched on her head despite being indoors. She didn't bother greeting anyone this time. She didn't have to. She was the boss now. Team meeting in the conference room in 10 minutes, she announced, her voice echoing across the cubicles. Big opportunity. Mandatory attendance. Groans rippled quietly, but the staff obeyed. Nobody could risk being labeled disloyal to the CEO's niece. Lauren walked in last, binder tucked under her arm. She already knew something was coming. The way Madison had looked at her on Friday, sweet smile hiding a blade, had told her as much. Madison stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, radiating authority she hadn't earned. Behind her, the whiteboard displayed a single word written in bold marker, Brookfield. As you all know, Madison began. Brookfield Industries is one of our most important accounts. They've been wavering lately, but I convinced them we can win their confidence back. This is our chance to prove ourselves. Lauren's chest tightened. Brookfield. One of their most difficult clients. Demanding. Unforgiving. And Madison had just promised them what? She found out a moment later. I assured them we could deliver a comprehensive operations overhaul plan in. Madison paused dramatically, as if savoring the effect, 2 weeks. The room went dead silent. A few jaws dropped. One employee actually coughed in shock. 2 weeks? An overhaul like that usually required at least 2 months. Lauren's pulse thudded in her ears. That timeline is unrealistic, she said carefully, trying to keep her voice even. Brookfield systems are complicated. To meet their expectations, we'd need. Madison cut her off with a dazzling smile. That's why I'm putting you in charge, Lauren. If anyone can make the impossible possible, it's you. The words landed like shackles. Lauren knew instantly what this was. It wasn't praise. It was a trap. If she failed, Madison could blame her publicly, tarnishing her flawless reputation. If she succeeded, Madison would take the credit for inspiring her. Either way, Madison won. Around the table, employees shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided Lauren's eyes. Others gave her silent looks of pity. Everyone understood what had just happened. Lauren inhaled slowly, steadying herself. 2 weeks is not enough, she repeated firmly. It puts the company at risk. If Brookfield is dissatisfied, they won't be, Madison interrupted, her smile sharpening. I promise them results, and I trust you won't let me or this company down. Richard's voice echoed in Lauren's memory. Don't let jealousy ruin your legacy. She clenched her jaw. This wasn't jealousy. This was sabotage dressed as opportunity. But walking away wasn't an option. If she refused, she would be painted as insubordinate, maybe even disloyal. Madison would twist it, and Richard would believe her. So Lauren did the only thing she could. She nodded once. Understood. Madison's grin widened in triumph. Excellent. I knew I could count on you. Everyone, support Lauren however she needs. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks to celebrate a job well done. The meeting ended. Chairs scraped. Employees filed out in uneasy silence. Lauren gathered her binder slowly, her hands steady even as her blood simmered. Peter from accounting lingered by the door. This is insane, he whispered. She's setting you up to fail. Lauren glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Then I'll just have to make failure impossible. Back at her desk, she spread out the Brookfield files, pages and spreadsheets spilling across the surface. She studied them with the intensity of a general planning a war campaign. Every instinct told her this was a no-win scenario. But she refused to hand Madison the satisfaction of watching her stumble. For the next several days, Lauren worked like a woman possessed. 12-hour shifts blurred into 15. She skipped lunch, ignored her phone, and slept in snatches of 3 hours at night. Her apartment became a temporary crash pad, the office, her battlefield. Her team noticed. One by one, colleagues began slipping back into the office after hours to quietly help. Peter triple-checked financial models. Sarah from marketing offered insights into client behavior. Even a junior analyst, nervous but loyal, volunteered to handle the grunt work. They weren't doing it for Madison. Everyone knew that. They were doing it for Lauren, the only leader they trusted, title or no title. But the weight was crushing. On the 10th night, Lauren sat slumped at her desk, the city skyline glowing cold beyond the glass. Her hands shook as she typed, the words blurring. She blinked hard, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't fail. Not because of pride, but because Madison wanted her to. That thought fueled her more than caffeine. By the end of the second week, the plan was finished. Hundreds of pages of analysis, projections, and strategies. It was airtight, efficient, elegant. She delivered it with minutes to spare before the Brookfield meeting. When Madison presented it, she didn't even look at Lauren. She stood at the head of the room, flipping through slides she hadn't created, speaking lines she hadn't written. "This is the kind of innovation I promised you," Madison told the clients, her smile blinding. "This is how Coldstone delivers." The Brookfield executives nodded, impressed. One even said, "This is excellent work." Madison beamed as though the praise were hers. Lauren sat in the back, silent. Her chest ached with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with fire. She had pulled off the impossible. But instead of relief, a darker clarity settled over her. This wasn't the end of Madison's games. It was only the beginning. And sooner or later, Lauren vowed, she would turn every trap back on its maker. The Brookfield plan had saved the account. The clients walked away impressed, contracts renewed, and Madison basked in the glow of victory as though she had engineered it all herself. For a moment, the operations department exhaled. The disaster had been averted. But beneath the polished surface, the office was cracking. 2 days after the Brookfield meeting, Madison held an impromptu celebration in the conference room. She ordered catered pastries, brought in sparkling water, and plastered a giant banner across the wall. "Innovation in action, a new era for Coldstone operations." Lauren stood at the edge of the room, sipping from a paper cup, her binder clutched like armor. Madison flitted between groups of employees, her laughter ringing too loudly, her praise distributed selectively. To Peter, for handling those financials, she declared, patting him on the shoulder. To Sarah, for her marketing insights, brilliant work. She never once mentioned Lauren. Not even a nod. Instead, Madison raised her glass of sparkling water and declared, "This success is proof of what happens when we embrace new leadership and new ideas. Together, we're unstoppable." The room erupted in polite applause. Lauren's chest tightened. Her name was erased. Her labor, her sacrifice, her brilliance, all stolen and rebranded as Madison's triumph. Later that afternoon, the whispers began. In the break room, 2 junior staffers huddled over coffee. She didn't even mention Lauren. Of course not. Madison can't afford to admit she didn't do the work. Still, you think it's dangerous to say that out loud? Dangerous. That was the word now. Speaking the truth had become risky. By Wednesday, the department had split into 2 quiet camps. One camp orbited around Madison, ambitious employees eager to curry favor. They laughed at her jokes, nodded eagerly at her empty buzzwords, and defended her when clients raised concerns. To them, survival meant aligning with power, no matter how unearned. The other camp gravitated silently toward Lauren. They sought her guidance when Madison's instructions contradicted reality. They trusted her reports over Madison's speeches. In whispered moments, they confided their frustrations, their fears that the company was veering off course. Lauren noticed it all. She could feel the eyes that lingered on her when Madison spoke, the way colleagues leaned toward her during meetings, waiting for her silent approval before moving forward. But she also felt the isolation. The louder Madison's camp grew, the quieter her allies became. Support for Lauren was whispered, hidden in late-night emails and after-hours visits to her desk. Because to openly side with her was to risk everything. One evening, Peter caught her in the hallway. "You're the only reason this department hasn't collapsed," he said in a low voice. "People know it. We know it. But be careful. Madison's watching you." Lauren nodded, her face calm, though inside her frustration roared. She didn't want whispered loyalty. She wanted justice. The breaking point came during a client update call. Madison had insisted on leading the discussion, waving off Lauren's offer to present. Halfway through, Madison stumbled over a technical question. Her response was vague, almost nonsensical. The client frowned. I don't understand. Can you clarify how that aligns with the implementation timeline? Madison froze, her smile faltering. Silence stretched. From across the table, Lauren intervened smoothly. What Madison means is that we're aligning the implementation with a phased rollout to ensure minimal disruption. We've already adjusted the timeline to reflect your feedback. The client relaxed, nodding. That makes sense. Thank you. Madison's smile returned instantly, but her eyes flickered with something sharp, resentment. After the call, she cornered Lauren in the hallway. Her voice was honeyed, but her words carried venom. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but try not to overstep next time. Clients need to see me as the leader, not you. Lauren met her gaze, her expression cool. Clients need clarity. That's all I gave them. Madison leaned in closer, her perfume cloying, her smile brittle. Don't mistake competence for authority. I'm the one in charge here. Remember that. The words were meant to intimidate. But to Lauren, they confirmed something else entirely. Madison wasn't just incompetent, she was insecure. And insecure leaders always overplayed their hand. That night, Lauren sat at her desk long after the others had gone. The office lights cast long shadows across the rows of empty cubicles. She opened her binder, flipping through pages of data, emails, and timelines. Every mistake Madison had made, every reckless promise, every contradiction, she had it all documented. She realized then that she wasn't just enduring Madison anymore. She was preparing for something bigger. The office tensions weren't just noise. They were fuel. Madison was isolating herself, alienating half the department without even realizing it. And when the moment came, when the cracks in Richard's blind faith finally split wide open, Lauren would be ready to step through them. She closed her binder with a quiet snap, her reflection in the glass window sharp and unyielding. Let Madison play queen. Let her bask in borrowed glory. The court was already choosing its real leader.
Part 2 is still on the channel. Please watch and follow.